Hello and welcome to Simply Technical. I am one of your co-hosts, Evan, and I am followed here by Keaton. And this is going to be our second podcast of 2022, about to head into 2023. Keaton, you had a good break from Christmas and
Yeah,
holidays?
it was relaxing. Probably the most relaxing Christmas break I've had in a while. We've been the last 3 years. I've been either me or the wife has been sick during Christmas, so it was nice to, be healthy and with the family. So that was a big plus.
Yeah. The last 3 years have been kind of crazy. So, yeah, it's good to have a good break and to be able to see everybody and just enjoy family time, even though it can be stressful. You got to worry if your gifts are good enough.
Yeah.
But everybody, welcome back to Simply Technical. We're going to kind of go over some breakthroughs this year. And Keaton's kind of headed up this topic for today. Are these mainly breakthroughs for 2022, or are they kind of been breakthroughs, a couple years ago, and now they're starting to gain more momentum?
Yeah, these are okay. So I'm going to go through three of my favorite biology breakthroughs from this year. Two of them are specifically from this year. One of them, like you said, is a little bit older, a few years old, but it's progressed rapidly in the last year to the point where it's probably going to be widely used in humans over the next several decades.
Okay. And if we have some time, I have a couple topics for myself about just some advances in some renewable energies. Like I said, if we don't get to it, if we're at the 45-minute mark and we've already gone through some stuff, we won't start a new topic. But Keaton, why don't you go ahead and lead off with your first one?
Yeah. Okay, so the first one, this actually came out in early 2022. So I think it came out in January of 2022. It from some researchers at Pennsylvania University, and what they are doing is they take T cells, so an immune cell that generally, well, I guess I got to kind of go back and explain the platform. So chimeric antigen receptor T cells have been a sort of new treatment for cancer in the last few years. That essentially what you do at a high level is you take the T cells out of the body, you genetically alter them, or add a targeting antibody that will cause them to directly target the patient's cancer. So it's a very personalized therapy that's been pretty new and has been pretty successful for some types of cancers. So the idea is these T cells will kill the cancer cells. So you wouldn't really think that what these researchers did is they wanted to see if the CAR T cells could help the injured heart. So a heart that suffered a heart attack, which you wouldn't really think that something that kills and targets certain cells is going to heal you or regenerate function in the heart. But interestingly, that's what they did. So I'll have to kind of go through a little bit of what happens after you have a heart attack. So you have a heart attack, the blood is occluded from a certain spot in the heart. This leads to cell death in that area, and that area becomes filled with fibrotic lesions, sort of. So the heart generally is pretty flexible. It pumps is pretty flexible, but when you have fibrosis, it becomes a lot stiffer. So it doesn't pump nearly as well. It doesn't fill nearly as well either. So this fibrotic scar is laid down by these cells called fibroblasts. That makes sense. And essentially what these researchers did is reprogram these mouse T cells to target the fibroblasts and kill the fibroblasts post heart attack, myocardial infarction. And what this did is it actually recovered the function and protected the mice from the loss in cardiac function you get during a heart attack. But what they did to make it even more interesting is generally when you modify T cells like you do in the general CAR T cell therapy landscape, this is a permanent mutation. So these are always going to target and kill the cells. So in the cancer landscape, you always want it to be killing and recognizing any cancer that sprouts back up. But in the context of the heart, you definitely need fibroblasts for general function. So you don't want it to constantly be killing every fibroblast in the body. These are necessary all over in different tissues. So interestingly enough, what they did is they basically took the COVID vaccine technology, the mRNA sort of development, and they instead of taking the T cells out of the mice, they infused this mRNA in a lipid nanoparticle that was specifically targeted to T cells, and this mRNA can reprogram those T cells to target the fibroblasts, kind of what I was saying earlier. But what makes the mRNA piece so nice is that it's transient, so it goes away after a certain amount of time, thus leaving your fibroblasts at a later point still intact as they'll continue to divide. So it essentially heals the heart and then goes away. And you could it seems like this would be just straight up off the shelf. You could say, oh, this person had a heart attack, let's throw this in them and prevent the fibrotic scar that generally occurs with a heart attack, so they have protected function.
Okay. So, I mean, on a super high level, obviously I'm not a biology guy or medical field guy. I don't think a lot of people realize that like your heart has to pump blood to itself.
Yes.
So there's multiple, is vein the right word?
The arteries,
multiple arteries coming off of your heart,
arteries,
going back to itself to,
mm-hmm.
It's a cell, so it needs oxygen, it needs, the different type of, glucose and everything that allows the heart to function as a cell in itself. And so from going upon that, these CAR T cells, it's important because we use what they're attacking all over our body. Is that what you're saying, essentially?
Well, fibroblasts are necessary for basically every tissue. You need at least some sort of fibrotic, a base level of fibrosis or ready to be made fibrosis in certain like scar tissue is basically
okay.
fibrosis. Okay. But this can become pathologic when it's like overactive, and it's overactive in the heart attack situation. So in that situation, basically what was cardiomyocytes pumping cells becomes just a fibrotic scar. And so it doesn't pump anymore, and it doesn't fill very well. It's not plastic, which is what you need in a heart. And we don't have any treatments for heart attack. We don't have anything that can regenerate heart tissue. Everything that is to this point that's in the clinic is basically preventative. Like we're going to prevent.
Well, stents is an example.
Yes,
a stent is going to open up your arteries and veins more as well, to allow more blood flow, because a heart attack is basically your artery
blocking
is so it's not getting enough blood pumped to it and causing obviously issues. And so another, the preventative thing is stents. Okay, well, we see that you have 50% blockage or whatever the percentage is, and putting stents in there.
It's a preventative measurement, but once the heart attack has happened, there's nothing that stents can do except prevent another heart attack, essentially. So I'm interested in cardiovascular biology, and then what I want to do is to be able to completely sort of reprogram what my lofty ideal goal, and the ideal goal, like the holy grail of the cardiac biology field, is reprogramming the heart, the diseased heart, so that you can recover the sort of youthful stage that we have now, post heart attack, post chronic heart disease, basically just rejuvenating it back to a certain state. But there's only like a few approaches that you could do that. There's the approach where people they think that you could take stem cells and inject them, and they'll seed the heart to allow it to repump, seed that fibrotic lesion, and the cardiomyocytes will go there and pump again. Hasn't worked at all. Hopefully it will in the future. There's also the people who want to bioengineer tissue So that's promising. Although I don't know how long it will be till that's in the clinic. And the unfortunate truth is, you need to open someone up to put on a patch, a cardiac patch. And then there's the reprogramming, which is basically saying we're going to turn these cells into healthy pumping cardiomyocytes. We're going to turn the fibroblasts into healthy pumping cardiomyocytes. We're going to turn whatever junk is in here to a healthy state again. And I think this is like the first this is like reprogramming 0.5. This is like the first step to getting to that sort of like holy grail of regeneration in the heart. And so that's why I think it was one of the most interesting and underrated studies of the year. I don't see very many. I haven't seen anybody talk about this as one of the breakthroughs of the year, but I think it certainly is, and I think it can also be applied to a lot of things. I mean, fibrosis affects it, or is a part of many diseases, like interstitial lung fibrosis is essentially like the lungs becoming stiff to where they can no longer inflate, and it's a terminal disease. And so this could potentially be used as a treatment in that. There's, I believe there's, kidney fibrosis, some liver. I think this could basically be repackaged into many different disease modalities. But for the heart, it's especially exciting because I think it's definitely been a very elusive target for researchers over the last several decades.
Well, and I mean, you have to imagine from a like a general standpoint, when you get a scar on your arm or your leg, or it's going to be there for life. It might shrink up some, but these are organs that you're talking about, so like they don't just shrink or just don't just die off. If you die off, then you die.
You need every piece of that organ functioning to be a fully functioning human being, essentially.
Yeah. What I think was interesting, you said mRNA from the COVID vaccine, or technology that was kind of breakthrough, I guess. Would you say
it was a breakthrough in the clinic? It's been around for a long time in the labs, but definite breakthrough for people like seeing in the last few years, I guess, or a couple of years.
Kind of more mainstream. Do you think that kind of hurts? Because I feel like the general public, and if you don't want to get into this, I understand. The general public might have a slight towards mRNA vaccines because of being forced in the past.
Yeah, I could definitely see how it's got like some negative connotation, but the truth of the matter is, if you have a heart attack, you're at the point where, I mean, first off, I'm fully on board with the mRNA stuff. I was on board way before COVID. I was a big Moderna stock boy back in the day before COVID, because I thought the technology was really nice, because you could just basically take the mRNA and essentially switch out the sequences to target any disease you want. It's like super modular and quick off the shelf, or should be, I guess, which is why they were the fastest vaccines to be ready. And that's why why they beat out the general vaccines first, because it was super easy, super modular. But anyways, that's besides the point. To me, when you have no treatment options, that's going to be what you're going to go for, no matter what your connotation of mRNA is. I mean, the truth is, we're making billions, trillions of mRNAs right now, and all the cells of our body are making mRNA, and then eventually proteins, and that's how we execute the functions in all of our cells. So the use of the mRNA is just essentially to say, oh, we're going to code this protein in the cell, and in the T cell, you send the mRNA, and that mRNA codes a protein that targets fibroblasts, essentially. So, and the nice part about mRNA is it's not permanent. It goes away. So you'd modify the DNA, that's a permanent mutation. mRNA, it's used up and it's gone, and the T cell is back to its normal self. So that's what makes mRNA. It's always what made mRNA more interesting to me than DNA gene editing approaches for everything. I mean, of course, there's some gene editing or genetic diseases that are like
you want to get rid of, you know.
You want to get rid of, yeah. But most genetic diseases are really complex, where you have multiple mutations. So mRNA is sort of the safer approach to me, because it's not. I guess I don't really know how to say else to say this, but it's reversible. It goes away after a certain point in time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, since there's not really any, just to your point, there's not really any other solutions currently, like you said, besides preventative. So
Yeah.
if you don't have any treatment options, hey, it's either you live with the problems that your heart attack caused, or we can, you know, fix it.
Yep, exactly. No one wants to have open heart surgery, but if it's life and death, you're going to get that open heart surgery. But that's
well, the risk is you die anyways. So.
The risk is you die anyways. When you have this sort of like asymmetric risk, the reward is so high, or you're willing to take any amount of risk if the reward is you live.
Yeah,
essentially.
Let's pivot into this next point. I think you mentioned something about a weight loss drug.
Yes.
If you're done with that previous,
I'm done with the last one. Okay, so.
And I'm very interested in this, as you can tell. I'm a little bit larger, so hard work, you know, should win. But you know, if there's modern medicine
plus hard work is the ideal situation. But this is kind of the one I was talking about, where it was something that's been in the forefront, coming for the last few years, but it's really like launched onto the scene in the last year specifically, and that's the GLP-1 / GIP co-agonist, or GLP-1 agonists, which basically, so first off, it's just kind of like set the scene. Almost half of the United States is obese, and this obviously leads to increase in risk for essentially every single disease. So just to set that, it's almost imperative that you want a drug. In general, I generally think that chronic medication is generally bad. A chronic medication is usually used to treat symptoms, or not a root cause of multiple diseases, certainly. So controlling and treating obesity has been like a huge deal for the medical community for the last couple decades. And of course, it can be done through like lifestyle modifications. Like we said, you could eat less food, you could work out, but the truth of the matter is those are not easy at all. I mean, we're kind of like, unfortunately, adapted to, kind of like evolved to pack on as much weight as possible, in a way, because food was scarce for forever until the last basically 100 years. So this lack of food scarcity has sort of hindered our population, and the truth is, that's, to me, it's why the US actually lags in lifespan compared to most other first world countries. Most first world countries don't have the obesity rate that we do. So of course we want drugs, and I think we finally found them. And I won't go into like super details here, because I don't quite understand. I haven't read enough on the actual mechanisms of these drugs, but I will briefly mention that. So the GLP-1 agonist sort of started a few years ago. Semaglutide showed, there were small scale studies that showed semaglutide, which is one of these drugs, could reduce weight in diabetic patients. And so then they looked at obese patients without diabetes, and they saw some good weight reduction. So this trial started scaling up. The excitement started scaling up probably 2 or 3 years ago, around this time. And finally, this led to, in July of this year, a large scale phase 3 study. So the last sort of phase where you have double-blinded experiments done with a large amount of population. So this means that the patients don't know whether they're on placebo, and the doctors don't know whether they're on the placebo or the drug. And then they also had varied amounts of the drug. And so in this one, they used tirzepatide, which is a GLP-1 GIP co-agonist. So it's targeting two separate but similar incretins, sort of like hormones, and it's causing these to be upregulated. And essentially, what it showed was that at the highest dose of this drug, there was a body weight reduction of on average 20% over a 1.5-year treatment with tirzepatide, which is massive. That's better than almost every single lifestyle modification study. It's just far more effective. I think I can show, at least sort of look at the graphs of these. So let's see if I can share my screen. Oh, I don't see the share the screen. Oh, percent. So
let's see.
It's still showing up. There we go. So what you can kind of see, if I can zoom in on this, I guess this is so it's a 72-week study, so about a 1.5-year study, and the 15 mg had about on average of a minus 20.9% reduction in weight, and placebo almost not little to no. So it is obviously extremely effective when you compare to placebo, and this is something that doesn't. I mean, this is something that can completely change the way our society is operating. Why is it not letting me stop the share? It's weird. Okay, there we go. This is massive for the medical community because obesity leads to so many chronic diseases and contributes to so many chronic diseases that the cost is astronomical for healthcare. And when we finally have drugs to treat this, you're going to see massive weight reduction in society. You'll see less expenditure on healthcare, which will be ideal. And just overall, I mean, I think that in general, a healthier lifestyle is a happier lifestyle. And it sort of makes it easy because you don't have to do the exercise or the hardcore dieting. Essentially so they don't really know how it works, but the main mechanism that we sort of understand is it's suppressing appetite. So it's an appetite suppressant, and this causes you to just crave food less. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting field that's rapidly developing in the last year. And I wish I understood it better, but I think we'll see a lot more prescription of these widespread throughout the U.S. in the next year or two. It's already, I mean, weight loss clinics are popping up left and right, and all they're doing is just prescribing this drug. So it's like it's kind of like the marijuana clinics, but a little bit healthier.
Well, I wanted to touch on one of the points. You said it was reducing on average about 21%, I think is what you said, body fat.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, for just numbers' sake, obesity is if you're at 30%, correct? So like,
I'm not sure. I don't know the body fat. I guess it's not reducing 20% body fat. It's reducing 21% body weight.
Body weight, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that could be much more than.
Essentially, if you're a 300-pound person, then you lose 60 pounds. Is that right? Yeah, pretty sure.
So I mean, that would get a lot of people out of obesity.
Yeah, it would definitely
back into normal ranges. Obviously they have charts, depending on your height to weight, male, female, different charts like that. So that's quite impressive. I mean, ultimately you want a lifestyle change. I know this doesn't look good coming from a big guy, but you ultimately want a lifestyle change in the fact of like eating less or, exercising more. When it gets down to brass tacks, that's
the ideal. That's the ideal state. Yes, definitely. And I mean, there has been studies showing once the drug is removed, people will put the weight back on if they're not adjusting their lifestyle. And that is sadly how lifestyle also works. You have these people put into a study, And the study's really rigorous where they're restricting their calories for those, 16 weeks or however long the period is. But then after the, hardcore medical sort of
Trial.
trial is over, they're going to put that weight back on, or at least a part of it back on. It's been shown time and time again. It's just really hard to stick to lifestyle modifications, and for me, I'm all on board. I think everyone should try to change their lifestyle, and especially diet. Most research has shown that diet is by far the most important factor for losing weight. Exercise might help a little bit, but there's been sort of studies showing that when you exercise and you burn calories, your body is always burning calories. You burn calories to function. The heart is burning calories to pump. The brain is burning calories to think. Everything is burning some level of calories. But it shows when you exercise, your body will sort of slow the calorie burning down the rest of the day to sort of compensate for that calorie loss in the morning. So that just goes to show that when it comes to weight loss, diet and eating less calories is the most important. And that's just really, really hard for the majority of people.
Well, I mean, so we have such an abundance, kind of back to your, when you first started talking was, first time in human history, the last thousands of years, we've had an abundance of food. I can walk down to the corner and get McDonald's, or I have food in my cabinets, we're at an extraordinary time as far as food wise. But it is interesting that you say that about the diet. I lost what I was about to say, but
yeah, and I mean the truth is, they've also had studies not with the tirzepatide. So tirzepatide is by far the most impressive one. The one that I showed you the graph of is the most impressive one. But there has been studies with others that show weight loss, but then you tack on lifestyle modifications, and that weight loss is even more extreme. So I can imagine a world where, you get prescribed this drug and you lose weight, you shift the lifestyle, and then maybe you can remove the drug, and hopefully you can stick to the lifestyle after being on it for so long. Because the truth is, most trials that try lifestyle changes don't generally last long enough to really instill habits. But I think if you're changing your lifestyle and taking the drug and you're seeing drastic results, that's kind of more addicting than generally just changing your diet, and your results are going to be a lot slower.
Well, and I think to go on, like, as a society, we are addicted to how we are perceived by other people. And so, like, oh, hey, look, I lost a lot of weight, and, you're back on social media or whatever, and, oh, you gained a bunch of weight back, that's going to be so embarrassing. That's going to be embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so that social interaction that you get with losing weight, I think, is substantially higher perceived on a human level.
Yeah.
And I guess this type of drug would kind of rule out elective surgeries. Like, people get their stomach
bariatric, or the what is it called? Not
where people get tubes on their stomach and stuff, or on their
I cannot think of what it's called. It's very common.
The food track kind of thing.
But it has fairly.
There's a ton of side effects.
Yeah,
I've never done it,
devastating side effects.
There's so many people that I've talked to that talk
gastric
about
bypass. That's
that they have, like, horrible acid reflux. They get sick to their stomach when they eat. There's a bunch of. Most people that get it, they got to get it reversed because of how horrible the side effects are. And so obviously, that elective surgery will go down. Sorry if you're a doctor that does that, but in the long run, I think it's better as in a society.
Yeah, and I generally think that a healthier society is a better society, happier society, more productive society. So this is all around a very positive result.
I remember what I was going to talk about. You talk about exercise. My cousin, he posted he ran a marathon, and if you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw me post about it. It's a couple months ago. he ran a marathon and only burned like 1,600, 1,700 calories,
Oh, really? That's
and like did not burn that many calories running a marathon. And I'm like, dude, this is why exercise is so difficult, because you can run on the treadmill for 30 minutes and you burn
you
off
hardly do anything.
you
Yeah.
burn off half of your lunch. If you you only burn off 400 calories, something like 500 calories.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that was worth it. But
Yeah, and I mean the marathon, the 1600 sounds a little extreme to me. Maybe I don't know.
maybe I
Maybe
can find it.
something might be wrong with his calculator, but
It was
but
probably
that is
it was
true.
like an Apple Watch or something.
Yeah, but that is true. I mean, no one's running the Michael Phelps routine where they're swimming 4 hours a day and burning 10,000 calories so they can eat 15,000 or whatever. Michael, there's old stories about Michael Phelps eating like ridiculous amounts of calories because he burned so many during the day. But
I was way off, FYI.
no,
3,000 calories, sorry.
3,000. Okay, that seems more realistic.
But still, I mean, to run 27
26
miles,
26 miles, 26.5 or whatever,
26 miles, and to only burn 3,000 calories, like, the average caloric intake for a person for the day is 2,000. So,
yeah.
I mean,
And
that
the
doesn't
truth
sound like all
is,
that much.
see, well, I mean, yeah, if you're running a marathon every day, you can definitely eat way more calories. But in general, no one's doing that. I guess always no one's doing that. But most people are, like you said, burning 400 calories, 500 calories,
Running on the
exercising,
treadmill, yeah.
and that's generally it seems to show that quite a bit of that is going to be compensated for in the decrease of your body's activity the rest of the day. You'll unconsciously do less in general.
Well, I mean, you also, I mean, the mental standpoint of like, well, I went to the gym today. I should have this cookie, or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I,
That too. Yeah,
I did
definitely.
well, so I'm going to reward myself. Well,
Yeah.
okay, well,
Yeah.
you ate 3 cookies, and guess what? You didn't actually go to the gym at all because you took more caloric
Yeah.
intake.
Yeah.
Um,
But I want to say, I want to preface, exercise to me is by far the most important thing for health and longevity, but it's definitely not the most important thing for weight loss. It has tons of benefits, and weight loss is included, but the diet just like blows it out of the water, and the total amount of calories blows it out of the water.
did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with these weight loss drugs, or?
Not that I can think of. I might add, maybe, hopefully, we might end up seeing whether or not these drugs also play a role, could increase lifespan in mice. Hopefully, those studies will be coming out sooner than later. I think it might be possible, but that's on the docket in the future. Maybe that'll be a 2023 thing that I can announce
Well, I
as
mean,
2023 breakthroughs.
I guess to that point, if your mice are obese and they become healthy, they will generally live longer.
They'll live longer, but I'm talking about it. Let's just take a healthy mouse
Mhm.
and see if it'll extend lifespan. And I think it could be possible. Like one of the most well-known lifespan extenders in mice is calorie restriction. So will these drugs sort of act like a calorie restrictor or cause calorie restriction in the mice because they're just not interested in eating? And then it will extend. Will it extend lifespan? I guess we will
Time will
find
tell.
out. Yeah.
Okay, so if you saw Keaton sharing a screen earlier, you might have seen the next topic, defying death. Why don't you expand
Yeah.
a little bit onto that?
This is my favorite one, and it's very complicated, and I don't quite fully understand it, but also I don't think the researchers fully understand it. So it's just a really exciting and awesome result. And so this is kind of like a redefinition of what we think of as death. Generally, when we think of death, the heart has stopped, blood isn't flowing anymore,
Neurons aren't firing,
and yes, the electrical activity of the brain ceases. So researchers, I think these are at Yale, took pigs and essentially stopped the heart, let them dead for an hour. This is like dead, very dead, and if this happened to a human, you'd be probably in the morgue by then. So they let them sit for an hour, And then after an hour, they perfused the pig, so they basically infused the circulation with this cocktail of all sorts of drugs slash, uh, I guess just experimental drugs and other necessary nutrients, metabolites for signaling, just a ton of stuff. And crazily enough, the hearts, when they restarted the heart and set it to beat again, the organs started becoming revived. They got activity in multiple organs, and the cardiac activity was restored. They prevented brain activity from being restored because that would be potentially very unethical, I guess, to
Zombie.
have zombie pigs. So we don't really know the extent of whether or not this would, fully revive a pig, but it seemed like all the organs that they looked at. So I think it was the heart, the kidneys, and probably the liver. I can't quite remember. Probably the liver looked fine when they looked at their function. They looked at tissue sections of the tissue to look and see for cell death. They looked almost like nothing had happened. And this sort of leads you to wonder, is like what we consider death really death? We've, for our entire being, have considered once the heart stops, the brain activity stops, you're dead. But now this sort of leads to, well, what happens when someone's in a car wreck and they're dead at the scene, but we got there fast enough and we can just shoot them up with this new cocktail of whatever it's called. I think it was like Organ X, whatever they called it. And you could revive them potentially. So it's probably the most exciting thing I've ever seen in biology. And I don't know why more people aren't like psyched about this. It got very little media attention. And to me, it's like, why aren't we putting this in the clinic right now? Like, what do you have to lose? They're already dead. It's so of course the bioethicists or whatever have to hop in and say, well, they might not want to live or it's too risky. But to me, it's like,
Well, I mean, we have like do not resuscitate already. Like,
yeah.
if they didn't want to live, maybe
Maybe they signed something before.
Exactly. Well, I mean, like, there's people that are like, hey, if I can get revived, revive me.
Yeah.
And there's other people of like, I'm old. Let's time to move
finish
on.
Me off.
I do not want to be resuscitated.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I see the point, but at the same time, like, we already have kind of crossed that a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and you might not know the answer to this since it's so new. Resuscitating somebody, with the what is that?
I'm just like the on the AED, like shock.
Yeah, the shock mechanism. What kind of? I mean, obviously, there's the physical difference of, well, one's a shock and it's going to restart your heart.
Yeah.
This is it sounds like a cocktail of different drugs and.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So this is where we'll change, or I'll sort of modify. So that when you shock the heart, it's restarting the heart. If you shock someone and restart the heart at an hour post death, they're gone. It's like you're not going to get anything.
You're just shocking them to shock them, basically.
Yeah. But these pigs, they're having their heart shocked, or I don't really know what the mechanism they're doing. They're probably actually physically doing the pumping that originally restarts the heart, but in essence, it's like a shock plus
defibrillator.
Plus defibrillator. So it's like a shock plus.
Okay, so they're still doing the shock. I guess you still have to get that electrical current back through the heart to get it to revitalize.
Yeah, but what makes it new is everything gets restored because I think one of the main pieces that's helping this to work is they have like cell death inhibitors in the cocktail of drugs, so cell death inhibitors is going to prevent cells from initiating cell death. These processes don't happen immediately upon loss of oxygen. They take a little bit of time to initiate. So if you block them, it seems that it actually works pretty freaking well. So yeah, this is like, to me, is the most exciting thing in medicine I've probably ever seen, and I really hope it doesn't get left on the side like a lot of stuff does and take 50 years to get in the clinic, because this could be the biggest world changing drug in history. Even if it doesn't revive a human to the point of actually functioning again, it can be used for the people who have died and have elected to have organ transplant. You could take the organs out and then perfuse the organs with this to preserve them for longer for transplant patients. It would be massive for those sorts of implications at a minimum. But just thinking, if it does work well and you can function fairly well after the perfusate, and once they optimize it, if you can survive, I mean, this kind of ends like car wreck. It ends a chunk of car wreck deaths or traumatic injuries, because if you could replace the blood loss with blood transfusions plus this, I don't see what could stop someone or what would prevent them from being resuscitated in a way. And on top of that, there's also people that are 30 years old who have sudden cardiac death. There's athletes who have sudden cardiac death. These things are like not uncommon.
They're
It's
still atypical, but
yeah, they're not normal, but they definitely happen. And it's usually a genetic modification that's undiagnosed their whole life until the very first symptom onset is death. You don't know you have it until you're dead. And this could essentially end that if you get to the victim fast
quick
enough.
yeah.
If
And I'm sure there'll be some type of moral, like, okay, well, they've, it's been an hour,
yeah, yeah,
I mean, obviously there'll be some type of physical restriction of like, well, your self-initiated death, the death sequence, and okay, well, we can't do it now. But I'm sure there will be some type of moral authority of, well, you've been dead for an hour, we're not gonna, after an hour, we're not gonna do it, kind of thing. I don't know. You might think differently.
yeah. I mean, that's what the bioethicists, they all debate in their high towers. They'll talk about like, oh, when is it ethical or unethical to give the drug? To me, I want to survive. Give me the drug every time. So if we have to like have each individual person
Give a time
fill
frame.
out, yeah, then so be it. And let's get this thing going. I don't really think that. I think it's immoral to, not give a medicine when you have a potential to save a life. We wouldn't let someone bleed out if they were on the verge of death, or we shouldn't, I guess.
Well, I mean, we don't, and at least in the United States, we don't reject people if they go to the emergency room, whether
yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter what type of injury it is, they have to admit you.
Yeah. So, but of course, I'm not saying that this would necessarily work 100% in humans, and we don't even know if it fully worked in the pigs. We don't know if they would get up and run around because they prevented the brain from being resuscitated by essentially just clamping, preventing the blood.
Brainstem maybe or something.
Yeah,
kind of the brainstem.
Yeah, so we don't know if it actually would work. But with that said, the original paper that catalyzed this was from 2 years ago. And they used the same technology just in the brain, and it restored electrical activity in brains of deceased pigs for an hour. So, you put 2 and 2 together, it seems like it would definitely restore electrical activity in the brains. And whether or not that leads to a fully functioning pig at the end, who knows?
Well, and like you said, at the very minimum, like maybe we get more organs out of, donors, and I wonder what these kind of drugs do for a healthy person. Like normally you probably may not want to administer them to a healthy person.
Yeah, but then probably not. I have no idea, because there's so many drugs in the cocktail that I don't think it could possibly be ideal.
Well, they're probably going to try it on a pig sometime. So
yeah, eventually.
Well, so if this is being tried in pigs, obviously this is fairly early stages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this something I guess they're going to experiment on with other animals?
I would guess. I would guess so. I mean, actually, I mean,
As it becomes more
pigs are.
mainstream, I mean,
Yeah, pigs are fairly close to
monkey
human.
trials.
I mean, monkey trials would probably be next. But pigs are pretty freaking representative, especially at least a pig heart. I mean, that's kind of where we get there's a whole field of medicine or science that thinks you can like humanize a pig heart, essentially get rid of all the pig viruses, and that could be used for transplant patients because the anatomy and the physiology is so similar between a human and a pig, even more so, I think, than like a chimpanzee. I mean, just size wise. So
And
that's pretty.
for anyone at home, we're kind of describing the different, if you're not aware, the kind of the different trial stages of before they get to human
Yeah.
trials, and then eventually released for public use.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Monkeys
Generally, you
being at the
go.
top.
Yeah. Generally, you go cells, a cell dish, culture dish, mouse. Well, you might do C. elegans or some flies, like little worms or flies before mice, but generally go cell culture, mice, and then a lot of times you go straight to monkeys. But pigs are definitely the intermediary between the mouse and the chimpanzee, and then you end up in humans.
And this is more like one of the reasons why. I mean, obviously, to keep humans safe. Without these kind of trials, who knows what kind of havoc we'd have been wrecked with
Yeah,
if we just released all these drugs or different experiments, I guess, just straight off the bat.
yeah, yeah,
And so it's super important to keep humans safe. And
yeah,
as the trials, they get more and more human-like, I guess, is more human-like DNA and different, whether it's appendages or organs.
yeah,
Is kind of
yeah.
the thought process for the trials.
You want to get closer and closer to the human model is generally what you do for the trials. But with that said, when it's something as so the idea is, like you said, you want to prevent risky drugs from getting into healthy or unhealthy humans. Healthy patients have to try the drugs first, generally. But in this case, your patient cohort is dead. So it's like, what do you have to lose if you want to sign up for the trial? I mean, of course, you need.
Well, I mean, in a lot of these cases, people have donated their bodies to science. I mean, I've
Yes,
heard
yes.
of family friends that have said like, "Hey, you know, is it a cadaver? Use me as I want to donate my body to science for different medical research."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what makes this so interesting is this would be like a completely different trial design than's ever been done because you have to have a dead patients, but you also have to have consent. So you have to get consent from someone before they've died. So which means you need to get consent from what millions of people and have this ready to go in tons of hospitals because any of them who dies, you have to be ready to
Yeah,
shoot them up. It's like a very
like a
it would
stem
be a very
shot.
complex. Yeah, yeah, like a stem shot.
um, yeah, that is interesting. I mean, at least in modern medicine, I'm sure in the past they did plenty of experiments on
Oh yeah,
dead
yeah.
people. Whether dissecting or not, and whether
Yeah,
consented or not.
yeah. That would not fly in today's culture for good reason. For good reason.
Yeah.
But you definitely need consent before you attempted a potential revival of someone. Because I mean, the truth is, who knows if they come out
Sane, or
the same person, not functioning. They're basically paralyzed forever. They're kind of like uh, just alive in the sense of the body is
that exist
functioning,
a
but they're not.
vegetable,
They're not actually. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
a vegetative state. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which, I mean, I don't. We could go on a lot of tangents, and this might not be one of them. But like assisted suicide, and that kind of that might not be the right term. Hey, I'm a vegetable. If I, maybe that's in the form of like, hey, if I come back and I can't, talk, there's certain things. Just kill
yeah,
me.
yeah. Yeah, I actually think that would definitely be something that would have to be talked about with patients.
Assisted suicide might not be the right term. That's
I mean,
that's
that's
a
what
whole
essentially
nother
what it would be. That's essentially what it would be.
of like I can only exist with a ventilator or pull the plug kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, the assisted suicide stuff is like wild, but I guess
That's
this would be quite a bit different than the current assisted suicide state is right now.
Yeah, assisted suicide in that sense is a lot different than this medical revival, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, that's a whole nother socio-political topic that could go on for hours and is debated by quite a bit of people already.
Yeah.
But yeah, this stem shot of concoction of drugs sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And you get into a lot of different medical bridges that we haven't crossed yet,
Mm-hmm.
or not
Yeah.
crossed as a modern society, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that has never been seen, and you've never had this sort of risk reward profile in a drug ever. There's literally next to no risk if what you're talking about is just wanting to be alive, and the reward is potentially surviving.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate. It's like the ultimate drug if it worked. But there's so many ethical things that have to get debated, and there'll have to be trials in the monkeys, so it'll take a long time. I wish it was faster, and yeah, I guess that's as far as I should go with that, because I could get myself into trouble being too passionate about it.
Yeah. Well, do you have any hot takes about CAR T cells or weight loss drugs or this defying death stem shot?
Well, I guess I sort of already said my hot take on the organ, the revival, which is my hot take is that this is the most world-changing drug that's ever existed, or a cocktail of drugs, potential. And then for the CAR T, I think it's something that it's actually, they're working on getting it into human trials now. So that's something super exciting to me. I'll be following it over the next several years, because it takes a long time to do the trials. And the weight loss drugs, I mean, we're going to see in 2023, it's going to be prescribed everywhere. It's already being prescribed everywhere. It's just going to become more and more well-known, and I'm excited for that. So yeah, I think those are my takes on the biology breakthroughs of the year. There's a ton of other stuff in biology that happened this year. I won't go into so much detail, but I mean, textbooks rewritten on the TCA cycle is now a lot different than the general textbook. There's modular RNA payload editing, tons of stuff like sequencing. I think it was like a light sequencing, microscopy, like stuff that's just like so futuristic. We can't even imagine, but it's just, you could go on and on with what's happened in the last year, for at least at the basic science level.
Which is a lot different than what we talked about in the last podcast. Was there's not a ton of new physical advances as far as technology, a lot of software, computer based advances.
Yes. So like I said last week, there's not a ton of physical advances, but physical advances in biology are like happening at an extreme pace. But can we get those into people or into the real world is yet to be seen at scale, at least in some modes. I'm excited for biology. I do think biology is the first thing since like the space race in the physical world that could potentially see a massive acceleration over the next decade. I mean, that's kind of my prediction. I'm really excited for it, but it is also an extremely regulated field, both maybe overregulated, but for good reasons, for very good reasons. So we'll see if it does come to fruition at scale in the real world or not.
Yeah. Well, I guess my hot take might be that and this is kind of based off what you just said, that COVID pumped a lot of money into research. Obviously there's a ton of downsides to what happened with COVID, the economy, people, death, all that. but maybe the government or the money being funneled into biology is being maybe more focused, or maybe more money's pouring into it. Like I said, there's obviously a ton of downsides. I want to preface that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
maybe
and
it
there's
helped quite a bit.
there's been a lot of money since I could definitely attracted a lot more attention, but it actually didn't increase the budget so terribly much. But I
I'm
think
just saying, like Moderna and stuff with their stock prices.
yeah,
Obviously, they had the cash influx from that kind of stuff.
that money has definitely will definitely pay dividends. But the other maybe even more important part is, a ton of kids grew up and saw this whole pandemic happening, and they saw like real life innovation happening at a rapid scale, which of course a lot of people get really upset about the whole COVID vaccine thing. But in reality, it was a rapid innovation and put at scale in the world. And a lot of people saw that and probably got really excited about doing science or doing research, seeing that you can actually affect the future with inventions, which I think is something that a lot of like our generations lost, or not our generation, but basically every generation since basically the 60s or 70s has sort of lost the generation that even just a group of people can completely change the physical world by creating something. And I think that's probably the best dividend that whole situation will pay out. That terrible situation will pay in the future.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to sign us off.
Nope.
This has been Keaton and Evan with Simply Technical. Like, share, subscribe. Check it out. Check us out on YouTube, Anchor, Spotify. We were just going through all the podcasts links that were on earlier. So we'll catch you guys next time.
See ya.